Ladies and gentlemen, we're looking at the new psychology, the psychology for the new millennium, for the third millennium. And of course it is not the same as the psychology that we have grown up with in the last 100 years. The psychology that we're concerned with takes into account the inner nature of man. 95% of us live boring lives. Nothing ever damn well happens. It's a mundane existence. But once you start to take into account the factors in your life which are what we call esoteric, if you take into account that you have lived before, if you take into account that when you lived before, you undertook certain behavior which may have consequences, good or difficult, in this life. You would also want to know, if you were turning in this direction, what all this talk about immortality is. Is this possible? How? In what body? And then there's this matter of what the soul is wanting you to do in this life. And all these factors play a very necessary part in your psychology, in your behavior. Now we must, of course, always use the principles of ancient wisdom in order to understand it. You and I know that we have a physical body which is very much guided by the genes and chromosomes that we inherit from our parents. We also know that the environment into which this physical body is thrust, say here, the environment affects the behavior of that physical bodied person. That's ordinary psychology, where we, of course, say that H for hereditary equipment times the environment, the interplay of the two equals personality, behavior. That's ordinary psychology. We, however, take into account a third factor, and the third factor is along the lines that I've just mentioned. The consideration of the karma of the individual, whether the karma is short-term or whether it is long-term, whether it is difficult, whether it is good karma, whether it is neutral karma. And these factors presuppose, therefore, the existence in man of subtler states of being, not just a physical body, which takes 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years to understand in a medical school, but other structures. Man is just, the man that we can see is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it all there is the other 9/10, if you like. Yes, we know quite a lot about these other structures. There is the etheric body of man, made up of subatomic particles, a very real energy structure, capable of drawing energy out of the sunlit atmosphere of the earth and moving it around in this etheric body to places where it is needed. And so the degree of vitalization that the personality manifests is as the result of this etheric body. The physical body is the body of action, and it feeds off metabolic energy, the food we eat. The etheric body is the body of vitality, and that is an important factor because the vitality energizes the brain and the spinal cord, and we take that into account. But the matter doesn't end there. That deals with the physical body of man. There is, of course, that part of man which science is beginning to investigate now when it does its research into quanta. And the quantum mechanics involves the comprehension of this completely different state of matter which we call astral. And you and I, by the time we are 16 and 17, put together an astral body through drawing in emotional energy from the astral world and integrating it into this astral body, about age of 16 to 20. Then the sensory organs of the astral body begin to develop, and we become very sensitive to what's going on in the astral world. We may even come out of body in order to investigate it. So this is taken into account in esoteric psychology. There is, of course, as well, the rather hazy concept of a mental body. We aren't fully developed. We are not complete individuals. We have millions of years still to pass through in order to integrate everything that man is basically composed of. These three together, as you well know, produce the human aura, and the human aura is the effluent. The human aura is the effluent of the astral body. Energy coming into the astral body, expressed in our drives, the desire for security, the desire for response, and so on. And the result of this is an outpouring, an effluent, an exhaust, if you like, which contributes to that globule of energy we call the human aura. Matter is not complete there either. We have to say that we must take into account that other structure, which is the immortal part of us. And by that we mean not exactly what the Christians call a soul. They don't believe in reincarnation. They believe in an existence in some heaven state, which really lies only in the periphery of the astral world. Whereas we teach, of course, constant reincarnation until we have overcome the challenges of material existence. You and I have developed the spark of the divine, which we call the monad, which comes from the flame of the divine. The flame of the divine shattering into sparks. Each spark becomes the basis of a human soul, and with each life we contribute spiritual energies to that soul. That soul is on its own course towards its perfection, and each life provides a new stage of growth for the soul. And so we take the soul into account. We say that there are 7 streams of energy, which we call the rays, that affect these various bodies that we have talked about. And our study tonight is made possible, is made easier by the fact that we have this key to psychology, this esoteric key, and it is based on a septenary concept that the various vehicles of man vibrate in the end all as energy, and by interfering with our evolution, by undertaking esoteric practices or disciplines, we are able to vibrate in such a way that we are resonant with a particular ray. And this is what we call our ray equipment. We'll be coming back to that in a moment. What I must take you into now is the origin of the rays of our solar system. We say in the esoteric, as above, so below. As below, so above. And so we're going to look at the solar system. We're going to look at the solar system, note the likeness of the periphery of the solar system to the auric globe here, the auric globule. And of course, the center of our solar system is what Bailey called the grand man of the heavens. the grand man of the heavens, who is the entity ensouled within the body, the disk of the sun. And we must therefore, for the sake of a key to understanding all this, let us suppose that we live within the body of a greater being. We live within the body of a greater being. That being we call the grand man of the heavens. He has a stupendous cosmic consciousness. And in this being, there is a correspondence that needs to be brought out. You and I are aware that the center of action in the various bodies of man is placed in the throat, in what we call a chakra, the throat chakra. That the heart chakra is placed almost exactly over the heart, therefore slightly to the left of center of the breast. And then the solar plexus chakra that we've been talking about, the sacral or sexual chakra, and the chakra at the base of the spine. That's an ordinary human being, entity. And so by taking what is below and expanding it to what is above or higher, we now find that the heart chakra is the chakra which disseminates love. And we know from ancient esoteric studies that this solar system of ours is motivated by the rays of love. And it could quite easily have been something else. We may not even like it to be doing that, but its main note, the note for the whole solar system, is the mothering ray that we call the second ray of love wisdom. There are, of course, other chakras in this immense being. We could, if we like, talk about that center which relates to the Pleiades, the seven sisters of the Pleiades. I mustn't mix it up with the Ursus Major. The seven stars of the Pleiades, which is the correspondence of the throat center in man. We're looking at an immense being because we're considering ray energies that affect all that lives on our planet. There is no thing, mineral, plant, animal, human, that is not subject to these rays in the formation of the form itself, right through to the psychology that we're considering. So in this immense being, our solar system radiates the energies of love wisdom. We could talk, if we liked, about another great chakra in that being, which would be El Draco, the dragon, a constellation. We could talk about Sirius and the Ajna center being corresponding to each other. And so this helps us to understand that these rays are immense, so immense that we call them lords, ray lords, the lord of the seventh ray, the lord of the fifth ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science. And you must learn the lingo of these things. You know, in the medical world, we have medicalese. And you can talk medicalese in front of a dying patient, and the patient knows nothing of what you're saying because you're talking medicalese, just as your lawyers can talk legalese, and you don't know what they're saying either. So this is the lingo, and if you want to learn about this subject, it's good to bandy the words, the materials of it about. So we say that there are seven qualities, and there they are, the seven rays, and these seven rays include therefore the love wisdom ray, and the love wisdom ray is the mother ray of our solar system, and its color is indigo, said to be the color of the sky at night. Its color is said to be indigo, and its energies are the energies of love wisdom. It is the mother ray. It is the mother ray. And so we talk about the mothering ray of love wisdom, which is the ray of our solar system, and that it has 7 subrays. And these 7 subrays are, I'm not going to be able to get the colors in, but I'll try. The first ray of will and power, the second ray of love wisdom, that's the mother ray pouring through it, and the third ray of active intelligence, the fourth ray of art and harmony through conflict, the fifth ray of concrete knowledge and analytical science, and the sixth ray of, not meant to be that blue, there we are, let's try this one, the sixth ray of devotion and idealism, and finally the seventh ray of ceremonial order and ritual. And we're influenced by all these rays, but more of one or the other according to the nature of our structure, of our various bodies that interpenetrate each other. In the esoteric psychology that we teach, we undertake a ray analysis. And the ray analysis is meant to indicate to you what the rays of these various bodies are. By knowing what your rays are, or coming to a very close assessment, you may undertake certain disciplines which will help you to integrate yourself spiritually. You all know that we start the path off by being vaguely aware that there is a goal or a destination for our pathway. Then we become aware that not only must we keep on the path, but we have to integrate the various bodies together before the higher self will venture to use them to any degree of effectiveness. And we call that psychosynthesis. The ability, by means of well-known esoteric disciplines, to put these structures together so that they become a unity, a unified whole, and the entity that you've now created is susceptible to great incursions of energy from the higher self, the immortal part of you. And then on top of it, knowing your soul's ray, to be able to understand that you now have in your possession the knowledge of what intention your higher self has for you in this life, and probably in another 28 lives, or possibly in another 28 lives, because the ray of the soul tends to change about every 28 lives. It's a fascinating subject, of course. So what is it we are talking about now in terms of integrating bodies? We're talking about 5 bodies. We all possess 5 bodies. And we build the interpretation of these 5 bodies around a formula. And the formula indicates here the physical body, and here the astral body, and here the mental body. Now that's not difficult because I drew them a little earlier. The physical body is the physico-etheric. Then we say that in esoteric psychology, these 3 bodies work with each other and come to unified conclusions and produce the personality. And so that's another body, the body of the personality, which is the synthesis of these 3 subtle structures. Then we talk about the existence of the soul. So there's the soul, there's the personality, there's the mental body, the astral body, and the physical body. And when we do a ray analysis, we decide what the ray of the physical body is, and it would include, of course, the physical brain, which is not the same as the mental body. The physical brain is a structure that is similar, rather, in ray content to the whole body. The average person, now you can look at your percentage chart, which tells you certain things. We've talked about a third-ray physical body up there. In existence today in the world, our part of the world, our root race, we find that about 50% of people have a third-ray physical body. Now we're looking at the astral body, and we find that sixth-ray astrals represent 60% of the population in our part of the world. So a very typical analysis would place a third-ray physical body, a sixth-ray astral body on the ray of devotion and idealism, and a mental body, let us say, on the fourth ray of art and harmony through conflict. Those three together could be synthesized, and if, for instance, it was an artist who is actually expressing his artistic interests effectively, then it may be that the personality of the artist rules all three bodies. And by analysis, we may find that that soul of the individual is on the second ray of love-wisdom. And today, the number of love-wisdom souls is, of course, huge, 70%. There is a thrusting in of the second ray, which catches most of us here in this room, and therefore implies that we need to undertake second-ray tasks in this incarnation. And so this would be a fairly typical formula. It tells us such a lot. It tells me straight away that this person would be susceptible to depression, and that the depression would manifest itself easier in such a ray combination as another. It would tell me also that this person thrives, whether it's pleasant or not, he thrives on mental and personality conflicts. The conflict is unpleasant, but when the conflict is over, he's amazed to find that he's grown through the conflict. And so we call this fourth ray the ray of art and harmony through conflict. So I hope that I have given you the general idea of the rays. But we're here tonight to consider the second ray of love-wisdom. It, because of its mothering quality, stretching from the first ray right through to the seventh, and therefore embracing them all, it is a mothering ray, and we say that it represents unity of all life in our solar system. And it's true, because this is a love-wisdom solar system, everything is dependent on the sun. Everything is dependent on the sun. All flesh is grass. All flesh is grass. The grass that grow in our fields, of course, photosynthesizes the sun's energy. And once the grass is created, then most creatures live off grass or similar structures. And it all comes from photosynthesis. Years and years ago, when the heavens of the earth, millions of years ago, about 60 million, when the heavens around the earth were darkened by cataclysms, the sun was shut out, there was no vegetation for the dinosaurs, they therefore starved to death. And it is part of the reason, of course, for their disappearance. So now we're beginning to probe. We did the first ray of will and power the last time I was here. Now we're beginning to probe the second ray of love-wisdom. And therefore it is suggested here the unity of all life. This is the ray of gentleness in depth. Not superficial gentleness, but gentleness that goes deep down, right as far as the soul, if there is a second-ray soul there. And you can be quite sure if there's a second-ray soul, you can appeal to that person on a bridge, if you like, of absolute gentleness. Second ray, generally, manifests the force of attraction. There's no way out of it. Gravity attracts, and science will discover in years to come that gravity is a manifestation of love. The attraction of gravity in this planet pulls us towards the Earth's center, but when you get down to the tiniest masses, the gravity is still there, and love can affect their attraction. Ask me questions if you'd like to hear about later. Then there is the next quality of, and don't forget, the purpose of understanding these qualities is that you should be able to do a ray analysis. And if you put enough time and energy into it, it should be within your means. If you are understanding me here tonight, then you would be able to understand ray analysis. And one of the qualities of a second ray soul is harmlessness, the capacity to practice harmlessness. Now, you know, though we all talk about religion and immortality and all these wonderful things, you know that the sad truth is that our planet has evolved under regimes of violence. Nature is red in tooth and claw. One kingdom lives off the other, and it has been so for 3 billion years. And so we have no precedence for love. We have no precedence. If you're hungry, the order has been that you snatch the body of a victim. I'm talking about predators, of course. Snatch the body of a victim of a lower order or a lower structure. Dinosaurs, sharks, insects, mammals, all or most are predators, and they have lived by this principle. But the extraordinary thing, to my mind, is to note that among animals, and they don't have to be domesticated pets, but you can see it there as well, amongst animals, they seem, when you take the stress out of existence and you remove the hunger factor, they can live together. They have this extraordinary capacity. Now, where does it come from? Not from our origins, not from the origins of the planet, red in tooth and claw, our origins. It comes from somewhere, and it is from that center. The center of the sun, which is the heart chakra of a being we term, out of respect, the one about whom naught may be said. The one about whom naught may be said. And so we live in this solar system, and it is really a joy as you tread the path to be aware of the fact that there is always a supporting factor underlying the brutality of existence. Life is hard and cruel for most people. Underlying it, though, there is this love nature. And that love nature of the second ray injects the desire to be harmless, even amongst animals, to be inclusive, shutting no one out, making no thing starve. It's nature that produces the starvation of one of a huge brood of chicks. And of course, lastly, the great quality of the second ray is brotherhood. Brotherhood. The ability for us, treading the path, to look at everyone as brothers. Thank you. To look at everyone as brothers. The person who is more advanced than I am is my elder brother on the path. The person less advanced to me is my younger brother on the path. And the behavior of these two, even in astrology, is well understood. In trying to understand the professions, do that again. I'm really looking at my water, which has not been poured out. Thank you. Okay. We can understand something of the nature of the second ray through examining the professions that second ray people tend to do well at. The second ray of love wisdom is essentially the healing and teaching ray. Of the various capacities of the rays, this is the ray of teaching and healing. And I think it was Confucius said that 2 out of 3 people on the planet have the capacity to teach. And teaching and healing go together, as we'll see in a moment. This is the ray, therefore, of the natural doctors and nurses, but not surgeons. They tend to come under the first ray and the 7th, with the capacity to deal doggedly with a set of circumstances and a code of conduct as they do their surgery, which is not second ray at all. Second ray is healing, is medicine. They make good healers and they make good counselors. We're living in an age of great tragedy in which geophysical cataclysms can happen overnight, as we have recently seen, acts of terrorism, and who knows how many counselors will be now required coming into the new age. And being a counselor is essentially a second-ray capacity. Now, the beauty of the teaching part of this ray is that most disease and disorder comes from ignorance. People do ignorant things, not knowing, not understanding, never having been taught. They do terrible things. The way they introduce bacteria into their bodies, the way in which they become susceptible to exposure, and so on. And so we say that teaching reduces ignorance, and it creates what we could really call, by the abolishment of ignorance, it produces a condition which we could call preventive medicine. And so just by teaching, you can help to banish the great ignorance of the planet and make it a more healthy place. Now, there are teachers of all kinds, from those in kindergarten through schools to college professors, and they are very, very suitable if they are second ray. The second ray manifests itself through the sign of Gemini, and also through the sign of Leo, and partly through the sign of Pisces and Virgo. So it spreads well. This is the ray of the narrative writers, writers of any kind. And if you want an example of second ray writing, you must look at the books of Alice Bailey, which have as their cover the indigo of the second ray of love wisdom, and they are massive and all-inclusive, slow, gentle, penetrating to great depth, unhurried, and so on. And so that is the kind of writing that thrives under the second ray. But journalism as well. Charles Dickens, who really wrote as a journalist, describing his times, often in a series of articles which were later put together as novels. Columnists, people who write a column, books like those of H.V. Morton, who described London in his book, The Heart of London. Other professions. Gemini, which is the sign for love wisdom, rules the hand. And therefore, the hands of these people are often very agile, and the capacity to use words, which is also Gemini, makes them good typists, computer operators, and anything where a machine is required in conjunction with an inward flow of words. On the stage, they are the comedy writers, the light comedy. Not the heavy tragedy, but the light comedy. Bernard Shaw is an exemplary person in this respect. He has Moon and Gemini, and his light comedies like Arms and the Man and You Never Can Tell have been acted ever since, for the last 100 years. They make good interpreters and good translators because they're dealing with language. And language is Geminian, and Gemini is love wisdom. No sign in the zodiac has the capacity for love wisdom as is Gemini. Second-rate people love writing letters. They love writing letters. Any excuse to write a letter, thanking somebody, asking any possible excuse, the second ray likes to communicate in a letter. This is also for unusual professions. It is for the agony aunts, they who have to have another second-rate quality, empathy, the ability to put yourself in the place of someone who is a victim or is hurt or you would like to help. The extraordinary empathy of second-rate people to get into the nature, the personality of the one they're dealing with and feel for them. And of course the agony aunt is a good symbol for this. They have to put themselves in the place of somebody in trouble. Somebody who says, well, my boyfriend loves my mother, but he still wants to marry me. What do I do about it? And they have to give answers to that. This is the great mothering ray, the ray of love wisdom. And this is its home. Here, the United States and all the democracies are represented with great flows of second-ray energy. So remember that democracy is second-ray. Fascism is first-ray of will and power. When it is exercised, it usually comes from the right wing of the party, and it is fierce. Guns before butter. I can still hear the dictators saying that in pre-war years. But Britain is a mothering nation, should be, is taking up that role once more. And if you do things in Britain, if you initiate things in Britain, some desperate new venture, some cultural innovation, the chances are that it will not only survive, but it will go international. And of course, we have examples of this. We talk about our parliament being the mother of parliaments, which is absolutely true, both in continuity and in origin. We know that the innovation of our postal system, I'll cut that one. We know that the innovation of our postal system meant that it was transported all around the world and sooner or later became, as it were, part of social conditions. In the field of sport, we initiated and promoted cricket, which spread around the world, rugby, of course, in the town of Rugby, where there was a school that initiated it, and soccer. These three great sports have gone international, but I'm going to point out something interesting in a moment. Our language, which came from many sources, from Old English or Anglo-Saxon, and affected tremendously by the Normans and many others, our language became an extraordinary bearer of immense knowledge. It didn't matter whether you were going into the field of medicine or gardening or whatever. It somehow, because of its Latin nature, Latin origin, it was possible for the language to take all the meanings, and still goes on, and consequently has become international. I'm not trying to be jingoish here, I'm just pointing out that, and it's a very useful thing to know. It's why I returned to England from South Africa. I returned here because I knew that what I did here would go around the world and it would last. And that's what you're supposed to do if you're an occultist, to know the hidden laws of nature and to operate them when you can. On the other hand, the United States of America has also got a second-rate soul, like Britain, has also got a democracy in place. But things initiated in the United States of America do not persist in general. Their American football has not gone much further than their own continent, and many other things, of course, whereas our soccer, to our certain knowledge, has gone international. This is the ray that's going to mother also new religions, new religions. The world is in a transformative state at the moment. The Catholics are uneasy about the interpretation of the religion by the Pope. There are many conflicts involved in the reformative churches in Britain, as you know. And so these indications are that people are tired of the old religions. Their symbols are beginning to wear out. They no longer recharge you when you visualize the symbols of the religions as they used to. And so very quickly, I want to mention the new religions emerging, one that I have helped with, the out-of-body experience associated with a near-death state. You have an accident, you have trauma of some kind, a stroke, you have a heart attack in the street, you drop down dead. You're certified dead, as it were, for 4 or 5 minutes. And if they can rescue you, then it is possible for you to be brought back to life. However, during that period of 4 or 5 or 6 minutes, the people who have suffered, the victims, often report being out of the body and being in another world, the astral world. And in this other world, they have a religious, mystical, transformative experience, a mystical state which transforms them for the rest of their lives. They begin to understand from their experience that there is such a thing as immortality, that there is a God, an all-knowing being associated with our earth. And many people will begin to move towards the religion that will be built around this capacity to leave the body and take steps towards the great spiritual beings rather than remaining housed in our physical bodies day and night. I've also pointed out that there will be a new religion with regard to the environment. The green movement may be the beginnings of it. The veneration of trees and forests, reaching a state of not only being restored by various religions, but restored in a ceremonial way, in which certain days of the year are set aside for the people of that church to plant or to do battle for the forests and trees. A third religion is developing around the Claregate method, which is based on a key to ancient wisdom, which we call esoteric astrology. And through this understanding and employing of this key, it is possible to establish a link with your higher self very, very quickly indeed. in a sort of meditative state, assisted by the ability to take an aspect out of your horoscope, put it in the spiritual diary, and supplicate, even in the dream state, to supplicate the higher self. Please tell me, what is the meaning of this aspect that I have extracted from my horoscope? And by that means taking the aspect in the horoscope which represents the soul's purpose and is well known, and again supplicating for that, and by getting answers to know what your soul's purpose is. And that will develop into a religion. Then fourthly, there's going to be a religion developed around literature, English literature if you like, which is very rich, and through the ability to recite, instead of mantras, instead of ohms and things, not that there's anything wrong with those, but the ability to recite with a dramatic effect, but above all, trying to comprehend the meaning of the poem, that you draw down energy from higher beings. After all, it was through higher beings that most of our literature was written. Paradise Lost, written by Milton, who was blind, was through the medium of his inner being, his higher nature, and two daughters that sat on either side of him. And as he dictated Paradise Lost, their hands flew across the pages, and it was brought through. We mean that kind of literature, and it can be used for a variety of things. I shall try and give some examples later on. We will also have a religion built around karmic laws, how the adjustment of one's karma can be assisted by many who are in the same boat, if I may use such a crude analogy, getting together and working off the particular karma together with the appropriate ceremonial. I'm only planting ideas here for the future. And part of the action of karma, of neutralizing difficult karma, is immediately practicing harmlessness. Another religion will develop around the exploitation of color. The exploitation of color and its effects. Its effects on the eyes, the retina behind the eyes, and the vagus nerve through the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. The effect of this on the vagus nerve, which is the psychic area of the body. It is in physical tissue, the most psychic part of the body, and it is physical tissue. And then in the etheric body, Sahasrara, the crowning glory of man, which is the chakra that begins to stir and open when you learn to put images there. You put them there, not waiting for them to slide in or slide out, but you put images there. And through the construction of images, you begin to open this chakra up. One of the best ways of getting yourself to put images there is to be confronted with astounding color. Color variations, color patterns, whether they're whirling to a point or whether they are just flat colors on a wall, but the use of color. And in addition to this, the employment of precious stones. The employment of precious stones. Stones that are lit up by ultraviolet or lit up by infrared light. The placing of these stones in certain positions. It was Socrates who called the path of going up the spine from beautiful chakra to higher beautiful chakra, he called it the jeweled way, the jeweled way. And when I say jewel, you should think of course, of precious stones. And then lastly, just to make it 7, and then lastly, there will be, as there has suddenly become an interest in magnetism, I lost my fortune, experimenting with magnetism, but it's coming back into interest today. In the future, there will be a church which will have a circular theatre that can rotate. The chairs, the seats will be tiered, of course, like an ordinary lecture theatre. The theatre will be totally circular. The altar and pulpit will be in the middle, and it will be possible for the congregation to rotate around the central point or altar. It will then be possible to place the sick, the ill, whatever is being dealt with in that region, and this to spin. How fast, I can't tell you yet, but it will create a magnetic force that will concentrate power in the center of that moving circle or that rotating circle. And so the sick could be laid there for healing. We've talked about the politics of Germany, which is mainly democratic methods. The vote, suffrage, universal suffrage. Let's look at some Gemini morphology. Morphology means the shape of Gemini in relation to the second ray and, of course, to Pisces, Virgo, and Leo. Well, you and I know about Stonehenge. We know Stonehenge is a circle of stones like that it is very sacred, a sacred area, and that most of the stones are concerned with what we call trilithons, 3 stones, a stone like that, a stone like that, and a bridge between the two. And that's the perfect Gemini sign of love wisdom. And the stones, of course, represent that which is exoteric and that which is esoteric, and the bridge is the bridge or antakarana between the two. But more than this, the whole edifice of Stonehenge represents 2 gigantic cogs which are working on each other. The one cog is heliocentric. It is the sun. It is the sun cog of our solar system. And the other is our Earth moving around that great cog. And therefore, the two are connected. Heliocentricity and geocentricity. Astrology is geocentric for the time being. My esoteric astrology is both. There is the geocentricity of things that we have grown up with. We have grown up in the Earth's magnetic field. We're responsive to it. Whether we like it or not, we act in certain ways, and it is only through special effort that we can change ourselves. We believe that it is possible to call in heliocentricities in order to change us. Instead of being rolled around an Earth's diurnal frame, we can break out of that. And the idea of catching the sunlight at a particular time at dawn in the year was, of course, related to all this. But don't forget the mythology of it all, the mythology of it all. I always have to plead with my students to represent the mythology of our extraordinary culture in their researches. Now, the ruler of Gemini, now take another one, I'll start again there. I want to talk to you about Leda and the swan. The picture, of course, is popular, well known. It shows a swan embracing a beautiful woman, and that is what it is called. The background to it is this. Leda was the beautiful maiden who married the king of Sparta centuries ago. She had fallen pregnant to him, and one day she was bathing in the river Eurotas, which is famous in mythology in Greece, Sparta, and Jupiter happened to pass by and was struck by her beauty. He changed himself into a swan and came to Leda for protection. And Leda caressed him and comforted the swan with sweet words and kisses. But the closeness of the swan, and the gentleness of the swan, and the smoothness of its down against her naked skin transformed her, and it was possible then for the swan to make love to Leda. And Leda laid 2 eggs, and from each of these eggs there sprung twins. One of the eggs was the egg that, when opened, produced castor and pollux. And castor and pollux are the symbols of inner activity, the world associated with the soul, and the other with the personality. It is interesting that Jupiter is the lord of the 11th house, and Jupiter in esoteric astrology is represented by a swan. It is represented by a swan which looks something like that. Represented by a swan, and Jupiter, of course, is strongly love wisdom, strongly second ray, and it is imperious, and it is the ruler of groups. And so I want to conclude this talk with a consideration of something that is particularly interesting. Can you tell me how much time we've done?
Just under an hour.
Just under an hour. I'd like a break now, and we'll meet again in 20 minutes after the tea. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Is this the... What must I do? This one?
Is it possible to wind mine up a bit here so we can do that?
Sorry? What you're looking at. They may not be identical with the one on the board because every 10 years or so the percentages vary slightly. When I came to England back to England 30 years ago, the number of third-ray physical bodies was 60%, but they have dropped surprisingly, even with better nutrition. Shh. The rays that we have been describing so far are very complementary to each other. By that I mean the ray of will and power complements the ray of love wisdom. As we were talking about the hands, maybe I can give you an example through symbol of the complementary nature of the two. The first ray of will and power is the clenched fist. The clenched fist. Hard, determined, willful, persistent. That's not difficult to understand with the knuckles there and all the hard bones exposed. and used as a club or to emphasize a point. But after that has been used, you open up the palm like that, and inside of the fist there is the soft nature of the second ray of love wisdom. And so there is a very good combination in the rays between a first ray personality that a person may possess and a second ray soul of love wisdom, especially if that person is integrated and has been psychosynthesized. He will know when to use that, and then he would know when to use that. And the two together symbolize in this instrument that has taken man to great heights, which we call the arm, the hand. The symbolism is very strong there. When I open the hand, of course, we then have the arm indicative of ray structures. The main power of the arm is the upper arm, where you have your triceps and biceps muscles, tremendous musculature there that operates the rest of the arm. This part of the body is under the rulership of the first ray of will and power. The lower arm, from the elbow to the wrist, comes under the second ray of love wisdom, which often conveys quality. And in this part of the arm, you have dozens of muscles and tendons which ramify and make pulley movement and so on, in such a way as to give quality to the action of the muscle. So ray 1, ray 2, ray 3, and then the other 4. 1, 2, 3, and the other 4. And the third ray of the thumb is beautifully exemplified in this, in that it is capable, only in human beings, it is capable of opposing all the fingers. The apes can't do that. The hominids can't do that, but man can. And each one of these, of course, symbolizes one of the 4 lower rays. I've forgotten for the moment which is which, but it's easy to figure them out. So see the rays everywhere in the structure of the body. You'll find them in my books on esoteric anatomy, how the vertebrae are related to the rays, the signs of the zodiac, and how weaknesses in the vertebra can be indicated in the horoscope of the individual. One of the most beautiful things of the second ray of love wisdom is the way in which the energy pours out of an individual with a large complement of these rays. The ray of will and power pours its energy out in a steady, pointed stream from this area of the brow. But the second ray of love wisdom is an embracing energy. The example that I'm thinking of is a beautiful woman called Lou Skoltz, who lives in Cape Town. And I once went with her just before I started to study medicine, went through Grootskeur Hospital with her and to a patient. And the moment that she appeared, and the patient was desperately ill, the whole complex nature surrounding this patient changed. She advanced on him with arms outspread, this incredible embracing ray pouring from her, and he just melted into her arms. She comforted him, she talked to him, and it wasn't long before that patient was on his way back home. And I was very impressed with that and remembered that. So do remember, this is the ray which engulfs, and you can use it. Even on animals. If you have animals like dogs and cats, they soon learn to understand when you are embracing them with energy. You know, we're all human. Sometimes we tread on the dog's paw, and there's an uproar, crying and running around and not knowing whether he's being punished or not. And you approach the dog and you say, "Oh, shame, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Immediately the dog knows. The dog knows that you are expressing contrition, that everything is being made right again, and the extraordinary energy of buddhi comes through not only you, but into the dog itself and transforms the creature. It often happens that way. These people need to work in groups. They're no use on their own. It's not because they haven't got the courage to act on their own. They just don't have the wherewithal. They work best through groups, and you should employ them accordingly. Now, if you have a group, or you want your group to survive, then you should consider how you place these individuals in your group. Generally speaking, the first rays, if you have any of them, you put them right in the middle of the group, assuming you are seating these somewhere. But you might be able to use them in other situations. The second rays come next, and then the third rays on the periphery. Third, fourth. The fourth could be specialized like that, and the fifth like that, and the sixth like that. They're specialized rays. Third ray, great activity on the periphery of the ashram, of the group, and that is where they do best. But linking them all together, you must have your second rays, where they can assist the interaction between the nucleus of your group, which is the place of action, where action is determined, planning is done. The second ray of love wisdom can link with the periphery, and then specialization in the minor rays. And so when you form a group, it's very nice to think we've got everybody here is on a love ray. Then you find you can't get anything done. The group is incapable because of some of the heavy qualities of second-ray people. Second-ray people are good listeners, and the world needs listeners. You'll be surprised what percentage of people who want to have a consultation with a spiritual person, what percentage of them really don't want to hear from the spiritual person. They want to pour out what is within them, not just experiences, but their yearnings, their soul intentions, and so on. So listeners, characteristic of the second ray. They form a group for any reason at all. If three people in a big room like this meet each other and they found they've got tea sets which are the same style, they'll form a group of people with identical tea sets. Well, I'm teasing, of course, but that's what it amounts to. They can express themselves much better in a group. For heaven's sake, if you're working in groups, have some of the individuals in your group magnetic, so that they can be attractive forces. I had a very dedicated lady in South Africa years ago who was treasurer, and who was to attract money. She was a very unprepossessing person, and her nature was extremely cold. We never ever got any money. And she was poor, as we all were, but she was poor, and obviously not given to attracting money. When I came to England, somebody, hearing that I needed someone in the office, it was Betty Moseley, came to see us. She was affluent, she was attractive, she had a charming nature, and she became treasurer. And the money poured in, the money poured in. Obviously, you choose for important posts the appropriate person with a good karma. As I've told you before, I drive probably more than anybody here tonight because I go to lectures all over Britain. I choose my drivers very well because they're driving me, and I have to be quite sure that the horoscope is not badly aspected, that there are going to be accidents. And so we employ these things. The occult, so-called, has many, many forces at its disposal if we were to be patient about it. We have a hostile press. There are many things that we can't talk about in public. I ask you to give these matters consideration. Of course, when the war was over, the World War was over, group formation was part and parcel of United Nations. We had the UNESCO, the UNRWA, and you could go on forever, United Nations so-and-so group. And it was very characteristic of that particular time. The second-ray person is very conscious of responsibility. If you were to hear me talk on the qualities that demonstrate spiritual maturity, you would hear me include, inevitably, the capacity to shoulder responsibility. And the responsibility, or the desire to shoulder responsibility, is the result of spiritual progress and the preparedness to share the karma of the planet. Not just your own karma to be dealt with, even if it's a very good karma. To share the karma of the planet, and the planet Earth happens to have some of the worst karma in our solar system. Things, events that occurred in the early history of this planet earned for it very heavy karma indeed. Now, animals do not, generally, as it were, be held responsible for their actions. We can't blame an animal if it bolts down some food in front of you, and that sort of thing. But humans are responsible. And as you progress on the path to higher and higher levels of awareness, you are expected to shoulder more responsibility with each extension of your consciousness. And the second-ray soul has this ability naturally. It's not something that is learnt. In fact, one of the difficulties of the second-ray soul is that they stick their necks out. When you have a committee meeting or a group meeting and you say, well, we need somebody to be responsible, aren't any of you going to offer? It'll always be the second-ray soul that'll put up the hand, knowing that there's going to be a great sacrifice, but they do it. And they are wonderful, and they can't bear to be labeled. They can't bear to be labeled to belong to a group that has got a specific name to it. They far prefer to be in the group, and they'll support the group, but please don't say I'm a member. I'm a member of this group. It's much better to leave that whole matter loose, no labeling. And they don't like rules and regulations, things laid down categorically. This is what you do here. They prefer to be able to interact with other people in the group. The secret of leadership in esoteric groups is the ability to establish a link or a bridge between you as the leader and everybody in the group. You can be as unpopular as anything over a decision that you might have to take. But you always know that with each individual in that group, you have a link. And you make very, very sure that that link is never broken. I have guys that have worked with me for 30 years. Many of them. And that has been because I have always managed to maintain this silver thread, if you like, of empathy. I'm trying to think of the word when two people get on well, what do you call it?
Rapport.
Rapport, another word in marriage. No, never mind. Will you cut that out in your editing? Second-rate people don't worry too much about results. They don't worry about results. They're here, not even under a sense of duty do they present themselves at the group in the most difficult conditions. They're there because they have this sense of group loyalty. I was amazed during the war, being in the British hospital in Naples, and there were these wounded men in beds as far as the eye could see, some of them desperately hurt. But when they were visited by their friends from the line, who had not been wounded and had been pulled out, when they were visited by their friends, it would be only a few moments before they were raring to go to get back to the front because their friends were there. And their friends were everything in their lives. And many of them would abscond from the hospitals and hitchhike back to the front and rejoin the regiment long before they need have done, or to avoid going back home for being invalided out. And it is that sort of camaraderie, if you like, but in spiritual matters, that makes the second ray so famous. They always see two sides of the question, and they make awful business managers. They worry too much about their competitors. They worry too much about whether the client is getting the best of the deal and things like that. And the result is that they're not much good in business. It was Alice Bailey, I think, who said, if your group needs money, then it's time for them to express the love rays. And in an atmosphere of love, people will often give money for the cause. And I think that is absolutely true of the second ray. Now I'm going to answer questions, and I'll be happy to take them from anybody. I've got a clean blackboard. Yes, dear.
Could you tell me how you come to those percentages, please? How they actually made up?
Well, you can be quite sure they weren't in the Encyclopedia Britannica. Through cruel, hard, bitter experience, analyzing thousands of people's rays by public analysis, and keeping careful records, and also using methods of reaching ancient wisdom, which the occultists can use. A lot of thought gone into them, but I do want to point out that they tend to change through the years. I have met several fifth-ray physical bodies. I would say that that is probably now in the region of about 4, because I can count quite a few that I've interviewed since then. The ray of the soul, this fourth ray soul, this is going to increase rapidly, because the rays sweep into manifestation, and they also come out of manifestation. And at this moment, the fourth ray of art and harmony through conflict is sweeping in to Europe and is going to affect Europe profoundly, which means there will be many, many more fourth ray souls coming in to assist the mother ray, in this case the fourth ray, and in Europe there'll be a renaissance, a new renaissance in Europe. Very shortly, the cities will have caught up with their financial difficulties and will become very wealthy indeed, Paris, Rome, Berlin, and will soon be setting up the equivalent of what the Greeks used to call a city-state, the city-state of the Greeks. And you're going to get the emergence of these huge cities where the main target is going to be beautification of the city and protection of its art pieces. And so we can predict on that basis, with the fourth ray coming in, that there will be a great emphasis of fourth ray souls. Does that help?
Thank you. I'm just very surprised about the 70%.
70% on the which ray?
The second ray soul.
Second ray, yeah. 70%, yes, it is surprising. Almost everybody treading the path. It's almost as if a person treading the path indicates the second ray soul. The one that you need to discriminate against, of course, of all, is the first ray soul. And we have a very particular method of questioning to locate a first ray soul. A first ray soul feels alien on the planet. They feel as if somehow or the other they don't fit in. And they also feel that they must be about their father's business. There is something unique that they have to give to the planet. They don't know what it is, but it is unique and they must do it. And they, of course, experience the consequences of this. So that is very different from a second ray soul. The first ray soul has no particular desire to serve mankind, but would love to administer an organization that was serving mankind, like the UNRWA group and so on that I mentioned earlier. When we get more advanced into this course, we will begin to show you, may I have that? Begin to show you how all this vague sort of statement that has been made has got absolute relevancy. Here, for instance, is a method of questioning, and it is the second ray. You're looking for a second ray. So, what would you ask? You're looking for a second ray personality. What would you ask of that personality? Of course, you wouldn't sit there with a list and go through. You introduce the questions as you go through the biography of your subject. And sometimes the biography of the subject can show the first ray, because this person has a tremendous interest in documentaries on television, on history, on biology, on the genome, and so on. And so you can pick these things out. And eventually we will have the whole system of analysis available for you. And but that doesn't stop you reading my books. Questions? Yes.
rays that would influence that?
Well, I'm going to answer that by showing you the difference in the rays of these two great democracies. The rays, as I recall, of Britain is a second ray soul, a first ray personality, a seventh ray of ceremonial for its form, seventh ray physical body, probably a second ray astral, and I'm not sure, fourth or fifth for the mental nature. Would you say that Britain was more artistic than scientific, or more scientific than artistic? Hands up those who say Britain as a nation is more scientific. I bet you it's nearly half. Hands up those who feel that Britain is more cultural and therefore artistic. Very close. And that's why I put it like that, because there is a division between the two. The physical body of Britain is highly integrated and ordered. You know, you drive along your country roads and you experience storms and gales and things like that. You don't notice it, but that road may have been there for 2,000 years and has weathered so many storms. We don't notice things like that. You go to a new land, a land that has probably been occupied industrially anyway for only 100 years, and you see flaws develop very quickly in a road because it hasn't been tested by time. And so we are able, by virtue of our nature, to establish the order in our country, which is a characteristic of the seventh ray. Always remember that Britain is the reincarnation of Rome. Rome split into two. Part of Rome was in Rome, and then later the Byzantium Empire was the place where Rome was sited. And whereas Roman Rome incarnated in Britain, as you know, Caesar came to Britain and set the pace of civilization there, and Byzantium Rome went to the United States. And so there is this subtle difference. It was a great tragedy, of course, that the War of Independence separated these two nations, but there it is. Now, the United States I can't be sure of again. I know it has a third ray physical body which supports massive style and varied expressions. The third ray, very much like a third ray physical body in a human being. The emotional nature on the sixth ray of devotion and idealism, hence the strength of their churches, their Protestant churches. The personality is also 6, I should think, and scientifically 5. I don't see much fourth ray in the United States, but certainly both have 2 second ray souls. You must play with these things. You must think about them, and you must read. Alice Bailey's book, The Destiny of the Nations, has a lot of material. It's not identical to what I teach, but you have to remember she was talking about this in the 1930s, and we're now in the 1990s. Was that a question that somebody put? Oh, yeah, Jessica, yeah. Yes, sir. Finished? You've been... No, won't work. You got what? Got to be out. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the meeting tonight has been enjoyable for me. I can see that some of you are genuinely interested in this third factor of psychology, human behavior, because it's expressing itself in you, the dreams that you have, the waking dreams that you have, the experiences in meditation, the sensation of drawing on energies that go back in time a long way. all these point to the third factor in man. And thank you very much for coming along.